In a forest, a man woke up injured and disoriented. He checked his pockets and got up to continue walking. As he was walking, he started having flashbacks of his session with his therapist. The man, Ethan, is a Secret Service agent who was investigating the disappearance of 2 agents. He reached a diner and he asked the waitress there where he was. She told him he was in Wayward Pines, and seeing that he was not well, asked him if she should call an ambulance, but before he answered, he collapsed to the ground. When Ethan wakes in the mostly empty hospital, he meets Nurse Pam. She told him she could give him something stronger for the pain and told him the condition he was in. She tells him the driver of his vehicle didn't survive and that the sheriff has his phone. He then expressed a desire to call his wife, and the nurse told him the police had gotten in touch with her. He asked for his phone, but she dismissed it and left. Back in Seattle, Ethan's boss, Adam Hassler, informed another agent that they were going to take over the investigation. Ethan's wife, Teresa, is worried about Ethan and leaves him a voice message. She was with their son Ben, and as they were taking pictures, Hassler called her to tell her about the accident. Back in Wayward Pines, Ethan grows frustrated with the lack of communication. He questions Pam about his belongings and the empty hospital, but she avoids giving direct answers. Realizing he can't contact the outside world, Ethan pulls out his IV and leaves. Pam tries to stop him by blocking the elevator, but he insists she move, and he exits. He then goes to a restaurant where the bartender, Beverly, notices his condition and offers him a free meal. After explaining his situation, he uses her phone to leave a voicemail for Teresa. Beverly gives him a check with an address on it, telling him to seek her out if he needs help. On the back, there's a note warning that the crickets aren't real. Walking down Main Street, Ethan discovers the cricket sounds are coming from speakers hidden in the bushes. The next morning, a hotel clerk visits Ethan's room. Ethan asks if the phone is working as he hasn't received any calls. The clerk confirms it works, but kicks him out due to unpaid rent. Ethan goes to the address Beverly gave him, only to find the bound body of one of the missing special agents. He then heads to the police station to report the body to Sheriff Arnold Pope. Ethan explains how he found the address and requests his belongings, but Pope claims not to have them and asks Ethan to continue his story. Meanwhile, in Seattle, investigators find Ethan's crashed car but no evidence that he was ever inside. Ethan eventually gets a phone and tries to call Teresa and Hassler, leaving a voicemail for Teresa and a message with Hassler's secretary. Ethan returns to the restaurant where he meets Beverly, but a man there insists there's no female bartender and only he works there. Frustrated, Ethan becomes aggressive and is knocked out by the man, who radios a message about Ethan's poor condition. Ethan wakes up in the hospital, where Dr. Jenkins, aware of Ethan's history of mental illness, tells him he has bleeding on his brain causing a dissociative breakdown. Ethan denies this, blaming the town. Despite his protests, Pam sedates him for surgery. As he lies handcuffed to a gurney, Beverly appears and helps him escape after they subdue Pam. They hide in a cemetery vault, where Beverly reveals that the agent Ethan found was killed for trying to escape. She also mentions she came to Wayward Pines in 1999, though she feels she's only been there a year. Meanwhile, Hassler informs Teresa that no DNA was found in the crashed car, suggesting Ethan wasn't in it. Ethan wakes alone in the vault and wanders into town, spotting his former partner, Kate Hewson. When she sees him, she hurriedly takes her husband Harold inside. Ethan follows and tells Kate he's been searching for her. She warns him that they're being watched and says she's been in Wayward Pines for 12 years, even though she was with him just 5 weeks ago. Feeling uneasy, she tells Ethan to leave, fearing for their safety. Desperate, Ethan steals a car and attempts to flee, but finds himself driving back into town. Abandoning the car, he searches for an exit in the woods, and discovers a massive concrete wall with an electrified fence, warning return to Wayward Pines. Beyond this point, you will die. Back in Seattle, Dr. Jenkins reassures Hassler that everything is under control. Ethan, meanwhile, returns to town and encounters the sheriff, who accuses him of being a suspect in the agent's murder. The sheriff insists that Ethan has never worked for Seattle's Secret Service and orders him to stay in his hotel room. Despite this, Ethan continues investigating the agent's death, questioning the hotel clerk before returning to the address where he found the body. While examining the body, Ethan finds a note hidden in the shoes. Suddenly, the sheriff arrives and sends him back to the hotel. Later, Ethan returns to the bar, where he finds Beverly cleaning. She asks him to dance and whispers because of hidden mics, revealing she had a plan with Evans to escape. Ethan mentions the note he found and they agree to meet later. Ethan tries contacting Hassler again, but when the secretary confirms she's on a non-existent 7th floor, he confronts her and she hangs up. He then visits Kate at the Ballinger toy store, questioning her about Evans and the strange occurrences in town. Kate avoids the questions and instead talks loudly about Evans' widow. Ethan visits Evans' widow, who reveals that Evans never worked as a Secret Service agent and that her husband committed suicide. Back at the station, Sheriff Pope reminds Ethan that his confusion might be due to his brain injury and warns him to stay away from Evans' body. Undeterred, Ethan sneaks into the morgue and retrieves Evans' notebook, but is interrupted by Pam. As he leaves, he sees what appears to be his wife Teresa and son Ben being wheeled into a room. He follows them and finds Dr. Jenkins waiting, who tries to convince Ethan that he's suffering from a brain hemorrhage and urges him to consent to surgery. Suspicious, Ethan agrees initially, but changes his mind upon seeing Pam and decides to leave. Ethan and Beverly meet at the cemetery vault. He showed her the notebook, but she told him they should remove the microchip before they attempt to run away. Ethan hatches an escape plan. He questions Beverly about her timeline, and she restates that she got there in 1988, and she's been there for a year. For Ethan, it was 2014, and as they were walking, Beverly tells Ethan that Sheriff Pope cut Bill Evans' throat while the whole town watched. During their walk in town, they run into Kate and Harold, and Kate invites them for dinner the next day. Later, as Beverly works at the bar, the sheriff's secretaries, Arlene and Pam, complain about Ethan. Pam suggestively notes that Ethan's been spending a lot of time with Beverly. Beverly uncomfortably notes that Ethan is married and he misses his wife. As Ethan is going around the woods, he hears a gunshot and sees a man on a cliff shooting at something. On their way to dinner with Kate and Harold, Ethan shares his plan of escape with Beverly. During dinner, Harold and Kate make small talk about their pretend lives. When Ethan gets up to use the bathroom and ditch his tracker, Beverly starts to talk about her daughter in Portland, but then catches herself. When Ethan returns, he tries to change the subject, but Kate continues to ask about Beverly's daughter. The panicked Beverly gets up to use the bathroom. Ethan went to the bathroom and saw Beverly wasn't there. He tells Kate and Harold that Beverly has an upset stomach and they have to end dinner early. Ethan finds Beverly outside, extremely distressed after she accidentally mentions her daughter. Despite his best efforts to calm her, she's spiraling out of control. Suddenly, the phones in all the nearby houses begin to ring, prompting people to rush outside with flashlights and bats, searching for Beverly. Ethan tries to divert their attention, but she is quickly caught and dragged to a raised stage in the town square. As the townspeople gather, Sheriff Pope takes the stage with the captive Beverly. From a nearby building, Ethan watches the unfolding scene with a clear view. Sheriff Pope delivers a stern speech to the crowd, declaring that they will not tolerate anyone who defies the town's rules. Without hesitation, he cuts Beverly's throat. The crowd's reaction is mixed, some cheer in approval, while others, like Kate, struggle to conceal their horror, forcing themselves to outwardly align with the sheriff's brutal enforcement. After killing Beverly, the sheriff kept giving speeches while Ethan was running in the woods. The sheriff then leads the townsfolk in a rousing chorus of the Wayward Pines rules: do not try to leave, do not discuss the past, do not discuss your life before, always answer the phone if it rings, work hard, be happy, and enjoy your life in Wayward Pines. Kate and Harold went back to their house. Ethan shows up in the kitchen accusing Kate of participating in murder. She tells him that Beverly's death was a reckoning for not following the rules. He doesn't understand. Kate then told him she didn't report him and gave him his tracking device again, telling him there is always a second chance, but Ethan asked her to come with him as he escapes. Teresa and his son Ben have arrived in Boise, Idaho. Ben thinks Ethan is with Kate, but Teresa thinks Ethan is not okay. Ethan went to Beverly's house. While he was there, a realtor came to show the house to potential buyers and saw Ethan. Ethan told him not to say a word and fled from the house. Teresa and Ben went to the Secret Service field headquarters and managed to distract the receptionist. She used Ethan's credentials and managed to find out where Ethan used his credit card last. In Seattle, Hassler called someone and notified them that Teresa used Ethan's credentials to log into the system and that she might be coming to look for him. Teresa went to the gas station and learned that there was a car accident in a town called Wayward Pines. Teresa and Ben decided to drive there, and as they were about to enter the town, a police car approached and stopped them. Sheriff Pope came spilling oil behind him, and reached Teresa's car. He then told her her car was spilling oil. He then offered to fix it, but he instead cut the oil tube. Teresa thanked him and continued her journey. Back in Wayward Pines, Ethan attempts to escape by hiding in a truck with Wyoming license plates. However, instead of freedom, he ends up in a supply depot where the town stores the vehicles of those who have found their way to Wayward Pines. As he explores the depot, he discovers his wife's damaged car, eerily covered in dust, as if it's been sitting there for a very long time. Inside, he finds her belongings, confirming his worst fears. While he's searching, he's discovered, drugged, and brought back to the hospital. Ethan wakes up to a ringing phone, which he answers immediately. The voice on the other end tells him that his family has been discharged from the hospital. He sees Pam, who holds a baby. He asks her where his family is, and she tells him that his family is waiting for him at home. Ethan returns to Beverly Brown's house, which has now become his own. Inside, he finds his family waiting, and after a brief emotional reunion, he sends his son Ben outside so he can speak with Teresa. Suddenly, the phone rings, but instead of answering it, Ethan rips it out of the wall. He then tells Teresa that something is very wrong with the town. He then instructs Teresa and Ben to stay inside the house, and he heads out to confront Sheriff Pope. At the sheriff's office, Ethan finds Pope and Pam. He then confronts them about the town, but he can't find anything. The phone rings and Pam picks it up. Ethan then realized that these two were not the ones in charge. As Ethan walks back to the house, he sees Dr. Jenkins. Dr. Jenkins tries to talk to Ethan, saying the town needs people like him, but Ethan tells him he will not stay there. Later that night, Ethan sneaked out of the house to meet Kate. Ben saw him and followed him out. Back at the house, Sheriff Pope showed up, asking about Ethan. Teresa is weirded out by the way Sheriff Pope is acting and asks him to leave. Sheriff Pope reminded her that this was his town and left. Out in the woods, Kate confides in Ethan, revealing that she believed her partner, Agent Evans, had been dead for 10 years until he suddenly appeared in Wayward Pines, looking exactly as he had the day he disappeared. Ethan, puzzled, tells her that he and Agent Evans were together just 5 weeks ago in Seattle. But for Kate, it's been 12 years since she last saw him, deepening the mystery of the town and its unsettling secrets. Ben comes back to the house and angrily tells Teresa that Ethan is with Kate. Kate tells Ethan that she's already tried everything he's attempting to escape and that she can't go through it all again, but he tries to convince her not to give up. Ethan returns home to find the house empty, with his wife's wedding ring left on the counter. He rushes outside and sees Teresa and Ben walking down the road, attempting to leave Wayward Pines. Suddenly, Sheriff Pope drives up behind them, pulls out his gun, and strikes Ben. He then put Ben in the car and approached Teresa, but Ethan interfered. Ethan and Sheriff Pope engage in a fierce struggle, but the sheriff manages to recover his gun and aims it at Ethan. Just as he cocks the gun, Ben hits the sheriff with the police car. Ethan quickly grabs the gun and stands over the injured sheriff before shooting him and taking his keys. Ethan finds a remote on the sheriff that controls a large door in the fence ahead. As the door begins to open, Ethan gets into the police car with his family. A growl is heard and something rushes out, dragging Sheriff Pope's body away before they can see what it is. The air is filled with terrifying animalistic howls. After driving away, Ethan got Ben out and washed his hands. As Ben was cleaning himself, he went back to the car to talk to Teresa. Ethan told her he came to investigate the disappearance of Kate and Evan, but he woke up in the hospital. They discussed their plans and suddenly saw Ben wasn't there. Then they saw him holding a package and ran up to him. The package was a uniform and a note welcoming him to Wayward Pines Academy. Ethan arrives at the sheriff's station to grab some guns, only to be surprised with the news that he's been appointed the new sheriff, and the mayor arrives to congratulate him on his new role. Teresa took Ben to the academy and was welcomed by Mrs. Fisher. She told Ben about the programs and extracurricular activities they have. Ethan discovers a place hidden in the floor, and inside it is a vault containing files on all the townsfolk. He then read all of them and went out to talk to Arlene. He knows where she is from and asks her if she wants to go back, but she doesn't. As they were talking, Pam brings in Peter McCall on a citizen's arrest for subversive graffiti. She demands a reckoning, but Ethan just tells her to leave and he will take care of things. Ben is being interviewed by his teacher, who repeatedly asks him where home is, and he keeps responding, Seattle. She then asks what his father does, and Ben replies that he's a Secret Service agent. Sensing his uncertainty, she subtly cultivates the doubts Ben already has about his father, questioning whether Ben thinks his dad might be lying about the real reason they are in Wayward Pines. Teresa went to the toy store and met Kate there. Teresa blamed Kate for ruining her family, but Kate told her a lot has changed after that. Ben meets a girl named Amy, and she invites him for a walk. Amy asked about his old home and school. Ben asked about the fence and animals. At this time, Teresa interrupted them and took Ben away. Ethan is interrogating Peter. The phone rang and Ethan picked it up and heard a woman's voice telling him to call a reckoning tomorrow for Peter. Back at home, Ethan told her that they made a sheriff and that he met the mayor. They then realized that the mayor and Ben's teacher were a couple. The next morning, Ethan asks Peter about how he got to Wayward Pines. He told him how he went to a bar and met a woman named Denise. After blacking out in his room, he woke up in a different one and saw the woman, but her name wasn't Denise, but Pam. Teresa has invited Mrs. Fisher and her husband, the mayor, out to dinner. During dinner, Teresa asks Mrs. Fisher to show her the bathroom. The mayor used this opportunity to warn Ethan about Ben's school. Arlene is at the restaurant lamenting Sheriff Pope's retirement. Pam arrives and raises a toast, celebrating the new sheriff and hinting that she expects him to enforce strict punishment on those who break the rules. Interrupting Pam, Ethan raises his own toast. As Teresa and Ethan walk home, they encounter Dr. Jenkins on the path. When Ethan voices his concerns about the severity of punishing someone with execution for graffiti, Dr. Jenkins responds with a cryptic remark about the sacrifices required for the best things in life. Realizing that Dr. Jenkins won't be of any help, Ethan sends Teresa home and heads back to the sheriff's office. Back there, he opened the jail door and told Peter he is going to hide him in the woods. Teresa finds a note in the mailbox indicating that one of the senior realtors has retired and subtly invites her to visit the office the next morning. Peter took him to the wall. Peter told him that this was the end for him and ran to the wall before Ethan managed to stop him and killed himself at the electrified fence. Ethan returns to the sheriff's office to retrieve climbing gear, but Nurse Pam arrives, her demeanor menacing. She makes it clear that, unlike others, she isn't fooled by Ethan's actions. Amy lures Ben to the woods to listen to the piano music playing over the speakers. When Ben shows curiosity about the origins of the music and the fence, Amy subtly distracts him with a kiss on the cheek. Ethan begins to climb up the mountain, but something is watching. Ethan is moving cautiously as he makes his way through the woods at the top of the mountain he climbed the night before. Something rushes past him and Ethan starts shooting wildly. Ben and Amy awkwardly make plans to walk to school together the next day after their evening in the woods. When Ben returns home, his mom mentions that his dad is out trying to close his case so they can return to Seattle. Ethan is drawing a map as he navigates through the forest. Back at Ben's school, he was surprised to see everyone being nice to him. He asked Amy why everything was different here. As they were talking, Ben got called for an orientation. Teresa starts her new real estate job where her boss, Bill, welcomes her. He tasks her with assigning a house to a new Wayward Pines resident, Wayne, explaining that she's giving the house, not selling it. This will earn her a gold star in the process. Ben enters a stark white room for the orientation and finds two other students already there. Mrs. Fisher arrives and informs them that they have the honor of being selected as part of the first generation of Wayward Pines. She explains that only the truly exceptional are chosen and promises that during orientation, they will learn the truth about the town. Teresa visits the hospital to meet her new client, Wayne, who has recently been in an accident. Wayne, visibly shaken, insists on being alone and expresses unease about Nurse Pam. Teresa senses his fear and subtly warns him that it's not safe to talk there. Just then, Nurse Pam appears, congratulating Teresa on taking Peter's job. At orientation, Ben learns that the creatures he saw from outside of the wall were what Mrs. Fisher calls abbeys, which is short for aberrations. Abbeys evolved from humans, and their DNA is only 0.5% different from the people of Wayward Pines. She told them that they were cannibals and they were very dangerous. Ben and his orientation classmates are handed ancient-looking coins. Teresa has taken her client Wayne to his new house. Back in the orientation, the students saw the coins were from 2085, Mrs. Fisher then started asking what they remembered when they came. They all remember the accident, and Mrs. Fisher told them the accidents were not accidents and that they were in the year 4028. Teresa starts the washing machine to drown out the sound of the hidden microphone. Wayne quietly tells her that he recalls looking out a small glass window and seeing Nurse Pam and others moving around chambers filled with people, hinting at something far more disturbing happening behind the scenes. Mrs. Fisher told the students that after their accidents, they were placed into hibernation chambers, where they remained in a deep sleep. Ben and the other students learned that Wayward Pines was created by David Pilcher as an ark for humanity's survival. They are told that Pilcher is always watching over them, though they will never meet him. Ethan escapes the woods and discovers the desolate remains of what was once Boise. A helicopter lands and Dr. Jenkins, revealing himself as David Pilcher, greets Ethan. Pilcher explains that the world outside is gone, and humanity has evolved into something less than human. He offers Ethan a choice: join him to change things for the better, or face the dangers of the outside world alone. Mrs. Fisher insists that they must keep the truth from their parents, using a tragic story about a family that ended their life after learning the secret to stress the importance of their secrecy. Teresa receives a gold star from Bill and learns that new arrivals come to Wayward Pines every month. When she questions the pattern of car accidents, Bill advises her to stop overthinking. The three students got out of the room and saw the other students holding candles. Amy came to Ben and welcomed him to the first generation. Ethan boards the helicopter. As the helicopter departed, Ethan saw Abby's running towards them, growling. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.